my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And yesterday was kind of a reality check for me, maybe not for you, but running the mental exercise as we look here at the book of Esther in chapter 8, running that mental exercise about what would you do if you were in the position of Mordecai and Esther, and this horrible genocidal edict had been issued in the name of the king, and now the guy who was behind all of that, he's gone, he's out of the picture, and now you have the ring. You're the ones in charge of the king's words, and you get to decide, a total blank check, whatever you want to do. You can issue that edict to solve the problem, anything other than something that directly countermands the king's order. You can't do that. And so yesterday, just gaming out a few of the different options for how you could unmake this problem. It's like, yeah, I don't know if there are a ton of good options here. This is a bit of a pickle. This is a tricky conundrum. And it's super easy, of course, from across the millennia, sitting on my couch with food in front of me and climate control and everything's beautiful and easy to be like, oh, you idiots, you should do this, or that was wrong. I have modern moral sensibilities. I know how everything ought to be. But just going through the exercise of thinking about what it would be like to be there and have to make the choice and endure the consequences or benefits of that choice, a little more pressure. Not as easy as it looks. Not as easy as it looks. So since we ran through a few of my less than stellar suggestions for what to do in their situation yesterday, let's go through what they actually do here today. So we're going to be comparing Esther 8 and Esther 3 because they are matching passages. It's kind of like poetry. It rhymes. So here in Esther 8, verse 9, the king has just walked out of the room. Like, here's the ring. Do whatever you need to do to solve the problem. Good luck. Bye-bye. And then it says, at once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. Now, let's go back over and look at when the vile Haman, enemy of the Jews, crafts his edict to have all of the Jews killed back here in Esther chapter 3. And all right, so we get a situation in verses 10 and 11 where the king's like, I don't care about any of this. Here's my ring, and keep the money. Do whatever you want with whoever these people are you're interested in. There's a lot of paraphrase there, but that's the gist. And so, okay, now it's right in time. Here's what happens in Esther 3:12. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. Okay, so both passages, summon the royal secretaries, give us a specific date. Let's go back to Esther 8. Now that Mordecai and Esther have the ring, let's see what happens next. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. Well, hey, that rhymes with the opening line of Esther that I read to you a gajillion times when we were getting started. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. All right, so it's well established that this is Persia at its apex. And we know what satraps are. The satrapies are the main political divisions of the Persian Empire. The cool Persia map that I sent out to everybody who supports the program, I think we got all of the known satraps or satrapies labeled on that map to kind of give you an idea of where those are. And so a satrap would be someone who governs that. So then governors would be some sort of subdivision of a satrapy, and that political hierarchy didn't come down through the ages to us. We don't know exactly how each satrapy was subdivided, but presumably it would be roughly analogous to the United States being a country, and then Nevada being a state, and then each county within Nevada, Clark County, that would be the next layer down administratively. And then below Clark County, I think that's a county Las Vegas is in, right? Then below that would be the city of Las Vegas. And so you have all of these different levels of authority. And I'm sure the original audience knew exactly what they were, and they would understand that the point is that this is being written to every level of government. And that somehow the author of Esther, when they add up the levels of government, they come up with 127 provinces. And they come up with the same geographic boundaries from India to Cush, Cush being southern Egypt, northern Ethiopia. All right, so I'll go back over to Esther chapter 3. Okay, we pick it up right here with Haman's order. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. All right, so it's identical. This very intentionally rhymes. This is Mordecai and Esther doing the exact same thing, except there is one difference here, and that is that in Mordecai and Esther's edict, it says they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles, and to the 127 provinces. So already we're getting a sense of what the constructive proposal, what the strategy is here on the part of Mordecai now that he has the ring. He's not just communicating with the government officials, he's communicating with the Jews, the Jewish leaders in particular, patriarchs within Jewish households. I don't know exactly who. Maybe it's just to all the Jews scattered around the Persian Empire, and they are listed first in terms of priority of who gets written to. So that's a big difference. In the first one, in Esther chapter 3, the Jews were the direct object. All the message is about them, but now the message is to them. Okay, yeah, we're getting somewhere. All right, let's keep going here in Esther chapter 8 and see what else gets written. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Okay, well, I already read that part over in Esther chapter 3 with Haman's order about it being issued in every language. That's reminiscent of the edict that gets sent out in Esther chapter 1 that Memucan, the king's noble, had proposed about how we got to send dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. So in Esther 1, we establish that this is how the really important edicts that the king is really excited about, that someone else suggests he write, this is how that gets sent out when it's full send. All go. Get this to everybody. Esther 3 reiterates that. Esther 8, now we know the pattern. This means this is the officialist of officialist things, but it's not until Esther chapter 8 that we get that little nugget again about this also being sent out to the Jews in their own script and language. What would that be at this time? Well, it was becoming increasingly Aramaic at this point in history, but I'm not 100% sure if that means it would have been some ancient form of Hebrew that most of the religious writings of the Jews had been in earlier, or if at this point that transition to Aramaic had taken hold completely. I assume that if the text here is saying that it was written to the Jews in their own script and language, that suggests to me that we're talking about Hebrew here and not Aramaic. I don't know. Maybe somebody else does. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. All right, how does that correspond over here with Haman's order in chapter 3? All right, they're all going to be sent out. Okay, we're going to send it to everybody in there, all of their languages. And then we pick it up here with Haman's order. These were written in the name of the king Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Okay, that matches. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to, okay, so that matches as well. But then the next line here in Haman's edict is to destroy and kill and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children. So that matches as well. Everything that Haman did in terms of how the order was issued, the exact same thing is happening. So, I mean, clearly by covering all of these details, what the author is trying to say is this is a full reversal that is in play, and all of the same steps are being taken, except that now the Jews are the recipient of the edicts, not just the object of the edicts. And I think it's cool that we get this little note here about the mounted couriers. We've talked before about how the Persians had a Pony Express system that allowed messages to be sent all around the empire super, super fast. And so when the author of Esther talks about these special horses bred to the king, it's a nod to that, and also an acknowledgement of this amazing bureaucratic administrative system that had been built here. The fact that this system was activated for this situation says that this was maximum urgency, and I think the original audience would have definitely caught that. I feel like we made pretty good headway today. That gets us about halfway through the answer to the question of what this edict that Mordecai and Esther is going to be about, what their strategy is going to be. We now know that they are going to communicate using the exact same administrative dance steps that were used to communicate Haman's edict in the first place that made this whole mess, with one key exception. That is that they're CCing the Jews in this message, whereas the Jews were just the object of the last message. Next time around, we'll look at the specifics of what the edict says and what everybody is supposed to do. Final thing, just wanted to say thanks to everybody who signed up to support the program in the last few days. It's so encouraging. Thanks a ton for doing that. You don't have to, but it means a lot. And I am cooking up our next notebook for our next series for everybody who supports the program in any way at Patreon or any of the other places that we do that. You can learn more about that if you want to at thetmbh.com/support. Everybody who supports at any level in any way, I'm going to send you this cool little notebook that says Nehemiah on the front. And my hope is that gradually you're collecting all of these and that you'll have one for each season and that you do jot down notes and things that you think about in these lovely little notebooks. And maybe you even write some dates in there so that you have sort of this ongoing journal of your process of getting books of the Bible in your hip pocket. And then you can just have them forever. And when you take notes like that, it cements in your brain in a different way, or at least it does for me. So that's my thinking with making the notebook sort of the bread and butter. We're about to start a new series thing that I send out to patrons. I hope it proves to be a really helpful thing. And I hope there are some of you who end up collecting every single one of them and filling them up with notes and thoughts and ideas and whatnot. So thanks again to everybody who supports the program. Thanks again to everybody who does not. It's always cool not to as well. And we'll talk more about how this edict plays out mañana. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.